We're going to be looking at ocean circulation as viewed through the thermal signature of the sea surface. So we're looking at NOAA View, which is plotting annual average sea surface temperatures. So we can see western and eastern boundary currents that exist in the gyres of the surface of the Earth's ocean. For example, here in the North Atlantic Ocean Basin, we can see this very clearly defined current right here. This very narrow, very warm, and swift current is the western boundary current of the North Atlantic Gyre. This current is known as the Gulf Stream. This water then moves along at the mid-latitude and it returns as a eastern boundary current, which is much broader and colder. So we have this broad, shallow, slower, cooler eastern boundary current. So this is the Canary Current on the eastern boundary of North Atlantic Gyre. We can see the same thing in the South Atlantic Gyre. We see this well-defined, narrow, deep, obviously you can't see the depth, but it is deep and warm and swift western boundary current. That's the Brazil current. And then we have the broad, see how it's much broader, cooler, shallower and slower eastern boundary current, which is the Benguela current. That's the eastern boundary current of the South Atlantic Gyre. If you look at the northern Pacific Gyre, you can see the western boundary current here, the Japan current, and then the broad eastern boundary current, the cooler, slower, and shallower eastern boundary current, the California current. In the South Pacific Gyre, you can see the western boundary current here. That's the Eastern Australian current, and then the returning eastern boundary current, which is the Peru current, broader, shallower, cooler, and slower. We see the same thing, similar thing in the Indian Ocean. You see the western boundary current here and the eastern boundary current on this side. And so we can see these boundary currents by their characteristics. Their thermal signature, whether they're warm, western boundary currents, or cold, eastern boundary currents, whether they're narrow and well-defined, like western boundary currents, or broad and more poorly defined eastern boundary currents. It's hard to see the depth in this, and we can't see the speed or the flow velocity of these currents, but we can see the temperature and the width of these currents. So this is a very interesting way to view ocean circulation, and it drives home the fact that ocean circulation helps distribute heat on Earth as well. So these western boundary currents of these gyres are taking warm water from low latitudes to high latitudes, and the eastern boundary currents are taking that warm water that releases its heat and cools down. Those eastern boundary currents bring them back down from high latitudes back down to low latitudes, where they can heat up again, and the cycle can repeat. So these currents and these gyres are circulating water throughout the ocean, helping transport heat from low latitude to mid or high latitude on both hemispheres of the planet.